Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Tennille Lewismore, the Assistant Director of Student Organizations. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, as Allison mentioned, these sessions, each of the sessions we'll be hosting on Mondays at 4 are open to all students in organizations. So definitely make sure you invite all your organization members. And now I'll pass it back to Allison so she can introduce our guest speaker for us today.
Perfect, thanks. So yeah, we're excited today to be joined by Travis Gibler, who is a senior happiness expert with Presence. Travis has been working at Presence for nearly 3 years now, and he grew up in a small town in Michigan and now resides in St. Petersburg, Florida, where he's joining us from today. And before joining Presence and working with different college and university campuses from around the country, Travis worked at university housing at Central Michigan University, Southern Illinois University, Oakland University, and Florida Atlantic University. So we're really excited to have Travis here today to talk to us about setting up student org elections in Presence. I'll pass it over to Travis to hop on and share information with us.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. All right, well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining in today. I'm excited to talk to you more about how you can use Presence to set up your elections for your organization. So I am going to jump in and do a lot of screen sharing so that we can have this be very visual along the way. But Presence as a tool is a really great way for you to manage those elections and get that information out there for your membership. Along the way, I do want to just set the expectation for you all to jump in with questions that you might have. I know that Allison and Tennille are both going to be taking a look at the chat along the way. So any questions that you have, you can always pop in there. They can interrupt me, or you all can feel free to unmute yourself as well. Either one is totally fine. I do want to make sure that this is feeling very custom to you all. So if there are any questions that would help to clarify points that I'm making, or if you want me to, re-clarify something, just let me know. So with that being said, I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to jump into the screen share. So just let me know when you're able to see my screen okay. All right, are you all able to see UT Dallas Student Life?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Awesome.
We're good.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so this is your Presence site, so utdallas.presence.io. And basically this is the software that we'll end up using to be able to send out election information to your members or other folks that might need to vote in your election, and also for them to learn more information about what your organization might be. So I'm going to spend a good amount of our time in some of our test sites, just kind of for example purposes. So I want to start with what are we working on creating as we're working on making your elections in Presence. So to get started, I'm going to move over here into the University of Atlantis, which is our test site, and that I'm able to use in order to show off different functionality pieces. So each of your organizations will end up having an organization page. And I'll just kind of go in and show where your election information might end up being. So if we were to go into an individual organization, the Adventurers Guild is one that has a lot of pieces that are built out on this campus. We'll notice that this organization has general details, but also has forms that are attached to it. In this example, we have a travel release that's attached to this organization, but this very well could be your student government elections instead. With the student government elections or any kind of elections that you might be running, it's really up to you how it is that you make that information look and feel, and what kind of information you want to present to the folks that might be voting in your election. So I'll be walking you through how it is exactly that you can create an election form, send that out to your members, and then ultimately collect your results and see who won your election for the different positions you might be looking at. So we do have an example here of a student government election form, which I think is a good starting off point for what your elections could be. So in here, you can end up having a bunch of information available to your membership so that they can make an informed choice. So here we're going to end up seeing that we have different candidates who are running for different positions, and you can end up using choice fields like we're seeing here for them to select the team of people that they would like to select for this position. We also might have other positions where maybe there are going to be multiple representatives, and so maybe you want to have it so that they can pick 2 or 3 or more options potentially in this area. So I'm going to go through, and the senator race, we have up to 3 folks who can end up selecting for that particular area. You can't necessarily see my mouse right now, but I am clicking repeatedly and nothing's happening. That's by design because we've already reached our maximum. Depending on what your election cycle might look like, you might also have different questions, or kind of maybe you want to collect feedback potentially as part of your election process. So we can also have different areas where there might be different amendments or proposals that you're working through, and you could end up having folks voting yes or no on all those different options. I don't know whether everybody will end up using this necessarily, but you could also have Likert scales or verification that you want in here. So there could be a statement that you want folks to read and then afterwards sign, basically certifying their ballot election as well. So at a core, this is kind of what we're working toward, is a place where you can provide information to your student membership and letting them know, hey, here are the folks that are running for these different positions. And then also a place for them to make their actual selection and actually vote in that election. I'm gonna, from here, move into what it looks like once you actually have your results. But I do wanna just pause for any questions that might be popping up so far or that we would like to clarify.
We don't have any questions in the chat, but if anyone who's on the call has a question, you can ask now.
All right. I'm not seeing anybody jumping in so far. All right, well, let's move on to the administrative side of the system. So to get to the administrative side, I'm assuming that you all will know how to do this, but if not, I'm gonna just walk through it. You'll go up after you've logged in and you're gonna go into the administrative dashboard. From here, you'll be taken to the administrative side of Presence, and this is just for folks that are gonna be managing their organization. You'll be able to go from there into the forms page, which is where any forms that you have access to, you'll be able to see, including those ones that you're creating for your election. So here with the student government elections, I can click into this, and a couple of things that I want to highlight once we're here. So one, we use the site for a lot of training purposes. You'll notice that the views are super high. Yours probably aren't going to be that high, but you'll see the number of responses that you've gotten so far. You'll also see when this form was created and that it's still active, meaning that it's still accepting responses. We'll get into that a little bit more as we're going in and building this form as well. Once you're getting your responses in, you'll end up seeing that we have the different response titles that are here. And this is one of those settings that I'll reference back to in just a little bit. But basically, you'll be able to go on in and look at an individual response if you'd like to do so, to see what that individual submission included, so who that person voted for potentially. There are some ways that you can also set up your election form so that this is coming in anonymous. So basically that you won't have a name that's attached to those responses, but that is up to you as you're deciding how your election is going to end up working. As you create a form in Presence, you do have the ability to attach the form to your organization, like we saw in the example for the Adventurers Guild, so that it'll show up on your organization page. But you'll also have the ability to see this little share area. If I were to pop this open, this is going to bring me back to the form we were just looking at. So it's going to load in here with all of the different candidates that are running and be able to vote in that election. This is also a selectable URL. So you can end up also including this URL in, potentially email blasts, social media blasts, however it is that you're communicating this information to your membership, so that they know to do your election. Finally, the piece that I also want to cover is the summary. So after we've done the election, we've closed the election, we're going to have our results. Because the way that we built this election form is that there are predetermined choices. So here are your 3 candidates for the first question. We're going to have the information come in a way that's very simple and straightforward for the person creating the election to know who won. So we can see really easily here that Rachel and Amanda won this election by a landslide. They got 46% of the vote. So we're going to have that really quick tabulation that will end up happening as a result. The other piece, if I just go back a page, is that we also will be able to make edits to our form through this little editing side of things as well. We'll be starting off by creating a brand new form in the demonstration portion. But if at any point you want to go back into your existing election form, make some changes, maybe you notice a typo on somebody's name or something like that that you need to update, you can always do that in the editing section. So I'm going to also just pause for questions that are here in case there are any related to how it looks once you actually have all your election results. Are there any questions or things that you all would like me to take a look at here? Okay, I think we're all set. All right, so let's go in and actually start building an election form. So for you all, I'm gonna mostly stay on this test site like I was mentioning earlier, but we can always go into specific examples on your site if we need to do so. But to get us started, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go up to the top of this page, we're gonna go create, and we're gonna just create a new form. So I'm going to go through how it is that you can use the different field questions that we have in order to build that election form effectively, and also some settings that I would really recommend along the way. So the first piece is that we'll notice that we have this blank form here. There really isn't a whole lot of information there yet, and we'll be able to start making changes to it. So the first thing that I would end up doing is let's name our form. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say that this is going to be the chess club election for 2021-22. So basically we're going to be electing our officers for the upcoming school year. From here, you'll also notice that you have the ability to change this as being an active organization versus something else. I apologize, I am noticing that I have some notifications that I will just shut off real quick. Okay, so with that being said, so we end up seeing the active status. You do have the ability as you're creating your election form to save this form as a draft if you don't want this to really be published and out there for other folks to see. So that is an option that you have along the way. So from here, you'll be able to start adding in new pieces to your form. So I'm going to do that through the fields area. So say, for instance, we're going to have a couple of different candidates that are running for the president position. So we'll see that we have a couple of different options when it comes to the types of fields that I can add to my form. And by fields, we're basically talking about questions or context that you're providing to folks who are using this form. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a field group, which is essentially a container. And I'm going to start this off by changing the name of it. So these are going to be our president candidates. And then we can also, make some changes here. So say, for instance, maybe we didn't want this field to cover the entire length of the screen like we're seeing right now. You can go into the editing side here, and then you can make it small so that it only covers half the screen, for instance. Depending on how designed out you want this to be, that might be a good option for you. For the time being, we'll leave it large though. From there, we might want to provide some information about the responsibilities of the president of this organization. So one of the things that we could also do is go into the fields and then specifically add in a content field. A content field is not going to be information that you're collecting from the person filling out your form. So they're not going to be doing anything with this information other than reading it. So to kind of mock this up, I'm going to go into the editor section and I'm going to say, obviously, you would end up actually putting what those responsibilities are right here. And then we'll close that on down. You might also have certain things that you want to provide for the folks that are being elected into these positions. So some things that I see fairly frequently are things like a picture, a bio statement. Maybe we want to have a video because maybe instead of doing in-person debates, we're going to do those through video instead. All of those options are definitely possible with the President's Form Builder. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's add in an image. So we're going to end up adding in an image of that candidate. So we can end up doing that right here. And I'm gonna make this small. This will come into play a little bit later on. And then you could end up going in and uploading an image. So this uploaded image, that's gonna be good if you have the file actually on your computer. The other option that we do have, and I'm gonna actually use this example for the purposes of this training, is that you could also grab an image from a different location. So for instance, I went on Google and I found this picture of this adorable puppy. So we are going to go on in here and we are going to copy this image address like we're seeing here. So if you have a picture of your candidate that's hosted online, you also can do that as well. Better way to do that is that you could also end up using that content field again that we looked at before. So the same thing that we were using for the information about the president responsibilities, we'll be able to go in and make that small again, go into the editor side of things. And then once we click in, we can also put in a web hosted image as well in this space. So then all of a sudden we have this cute puppy that now shows up and their picture shows up on the form. You can do the same thing though with any other kind of, headshots or whatever it is that you might need for your folks that are running for these positions. The other thing that you also probably might have noticed as we were going in and making changes to this content field is that you also could go in here and you can also embed a link. You could also embed a YouTube video as well. So if you do end up having some of those options where it makes sense to upload a video instead, you could also embed that right into the page here as well. So in this example that we're kind of mocking up, for the president candidates, we're going to start off with just a picture, and then we're going to have a little bit of a bio afterward, what they're involved with, how they envision this position changing in the future, etc. So again, we're really just providing information for the person that's voting, so we're going to use that content field again. So instead here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to just say bio, and I'm just going to kind of essentially scribble afterward. So what we have then, if we make this also small, is some text that we can also put right next to this picture. In this example, I'm kind of anticipating that you'll have a little bit more information than what I'm showing right now, but then this would end up filling up this space. So you might end up having multiple candidates that will end up showing up in this same field group. The other piece is that you might want to put this person's name kind of in more bold text. Saying, this is puppy number 1 who's running, etc. So a good way to also do that is that you could add in a header. So you could also, and this is basically just creating big text. So there we go. We have the goodest boy, who will be our first candidate. So you're going to basically repeat this probably for your other candidates who are running for the same position. So, maybe you have, other folks that are running for the same position. And this is all really just meant to provide that information about this candidate. From there, though, you're going to want the person to actually vote for who it is that they want in this position for the upcoming year. And the best way to do that is going to be by a choice field. So I'm going to add one of those to the bottom of this form as well. So even if you have 3 candidates, you'll be able to just kind of stack them one after the other. And then finally, we're going to end up having a place for the choice field. And we'll have this be presidential candidate. For this form, we're going to actually make this required because we are going to make them choose one of the options that's available to them. So in here, we can end up using different options as far as how this information is displayed. That'll come into play a little bit more after we add in some options. So to get us started, the first option is that you can vote for the goodest boy. And in this case, maybe we don't have anybody else that's running for this position. So you could also have a no confidence vote or your other candidate, however it is that this election is going for your organization. From there, you would end up being able to go in and choose whether this is going to be a drop down. So over here on the form, we have a little drop down, or you could also make this into little buttons instead. So we're seeing here, or you can make those into checkboxes. So they'll end up seeing all the candidates and will pick the one that they want. So as far as actually creating your election form, it's as simple as this, really just providing information and then ultimately having a space for them to choose who it is that they want to represent them in this position. I am going to do another pause for questions that we might have at this moment. Are there any that have popped into chat?
We don't have any in the chat yet.
Okay, cool. And Allison, Tennille, as we're going through, have there been any areas that you would like me to clarify just so that we have that covered?
I don't believe so. This is great.
Yeah, none that I can think of either, but I do see someone is typing something in the chat, so maybe in a few moments we might have something.
Perfect.
Oh, there is a question. Are you able to make multiple pages in a form?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with President's Forms, they are going to be a single page. And I know that that's a little bit different from some other form builders that you might be working with normally. So one of the ways, and the reason that I set this up the way that we did, is that here, that's where these boxes will really come into play. So you can end up saying, here's our president, our vice president, our treasurer, whoever else we might have running. It'll all just end up on the same page here. But thanks for that question. Cool, awesome. other piece, just because I'm not seeing any other questions that are popping into the chat. The other thing is that if there are any of those other types of election questions that you might have, so proposals, et cetera, or some of those questions that might have multiple options that folks can select, you can also update the settings on the choice field. So this is really where we're going to be collecting that information and actually having that vote happen. So in here in the choice settings, let me just get this open. You also can allow for multiple choices. And if you do allow for multiple choices, you can decide how many selections they can end up making in this case. So say, for instance, maybe you have 10 people that are running for your open position. They can select their top 3. Great. They can go on in there and they can you can limit the number of selections to 3. For the time being, though, this doesn't really make sense for our example here, so we're going to leave it as is. I am going to move on into some settings that I would recommend for the entire form itself versus actually building out the questions for your election. But if there are any other questions that pop up for this portion, please just let me know. From here, I'm going to move into the settings for the actual form itself. So we already started some of these pieces when it comes to the name of the form, and also that we want to save this as an active form. So we're going to be allowing for responses to come on in. But I'm going to also give the highlight reel of other options that you might want to consider for your form. The first one that I'm going to kind of skip ahead with is the ability to do login required. So we're receiving information from your IT department every day about who is an active student at UT Dallas and who should be able to interact with Presence in any way. So if, for instance, you're wanting to make this a form where you're going to automatically collect that person's first name, last name, email address, and verify that they're an active student, required login is a really great option for you. The other piece is that you also can choose for your responses to come in anonymous. So with that, if you're needing to do any kind of verification after the fact that they were in fact an active member and therefore they were eligible to vote, I would probably recommend not using this setting. But there are some other ways that you can also restrict who's able to vote in your election, which I'll get to in just a second. So anonymous is a great option that you might want to consider. In the example that we started off with, on the Adventurers Guild, this form, I think it was a travel release, showed up on their organization page from the Presence portal. So if, for instance, you want that to be the case for your organization, very simple, you're going to go in and you will be able to select your organization. So if I wanted to do that, this would end up showing up right next to that travel waiver for our elections as well. Doesn't really make sense with the example that I used, but here we are. The other thing you'll notice, though, is that there is the ability for you to require membership. So what this ends up meaning is that only members of your organization will be able to vote in this election. So if that is in line with how your organization operates or the constitution that you're working off of, this might be a really great way for you to do this as well. So basically, if somebody is not a member of your organization, this form won't show up and they won't be able to submit a vote in this case. One thing, just kind of on that note, and then I'll come back into the settings, is I do think it's important for us to just know how you can verify who does have membership in your organization in case that's an area that you're not super familiar with. So I'm going to take a slight detour and then we'll come back to these form settings. So say, for instance, let's go into the organizations page. For you, you're probably going to see 1 or 2 organizations, however many organizations you're an administrator for. But for instance, here with the Adventurers Guild, if you click into this organization page, we'll end up being able to move from there into the roster page. The roster is going to show all of our officers, advisors, and members. And if you use that setting that we just looked at, these are the only folks that would be able to vote in this election. All right, so let's loop back over to the form settings. So those are options that you'll have here. Some of these settings, I'm just gonna be upfront, are not gonna show for you. The reason being is that, for instance, campus-wide, that's gonna be something that Allison, Tennille, some other folks on campus might be able to do, but it's gonna be something that will show for everybody across campus. And so that won't show on your end. The other set of settings that we moved past is going to be about how it is that you want to collect the responses from folks after they fill out your election form. So When we were looking at the example before, we were noticing the response title. So if you wanted to click into an individual response, this is where you can select what that might be. So right now we only have one question that we're collecting. So maybe we want that to be the presidential candidate. So we'll be able to easily see who they voted for in that example. One thing to just know, I did have a campus one time who they were saying, hey, we've only allowed folks to vote in this one time, but this person's voted a bunch of times. And it's actually because they did the response title as that presidential candidate. And it looked like the president candidate was voting multiple times in that case. But it's really just, this is how you're kind of titling that response. The other piece that I would also recommend is, for instance, after the person fills out your form and submits it, they're going to get a very generic message that's going to say your form response has been submitted. But you can choose to customize that message if you'd like to do so. So this might be a great place to put in here, hey, listen, the elections will be wrapping up Thursday at 5 o'clock p.m. We'll be doing an announcement through Teams that's going to be happening at 7 p.m. on that date. Here's the link to join. So this success message is really where you're going to be choosing what the person that fills out your form is going to see after they hit submit. And this is a great way that you can customize that if you'd like to do so. And then one of the last areas that I want to talk about before we get into who can see the election results is going to be around availability. So you can choose when it is that folks are able to interact with this form and ultimately put in a submission. So, and also how many times they can do so. So one thing that I see very commonly is putting in that each person can only submit a response one time to this form. That'll prevent them from putting in multiple responses and weighing the vote in a way that it shouldn't. The other thing is that you can also choose when your form will be available to collect responses and when it will stop accepting responses. So you can also set that on your side as well. The last piece in the settings area is going to be around access. So because I'm the creator of this form, I'm going to automatically have ownership access, but we might want to have other folks that will be able to make changes to this form, update, the questions that are there, help us out with the election, or other folks that are going to need to be able to see this election form, the results specifically. So the way that this would end up working is that you could end up picking a specific person, and your list of folks that you're going to see is going to be very limited. Just because it's going to only show you people that you are going to interact with in some meaningful way. So oftentimes it's going to be other administrators for your organization, potentially some officers. So from there, you'll be able to select another person that you can see and say, hey, I want this person to be able to just see the results. They don't need to update the form or anything like that. I just want them to see the results afterward. This might be a really great thing to do for your advisor, because ultimately, if you create a form on your Presence account, you're the only one that sees it and sees that information. So you might need to share that information with other folks. So after you've done all of this, so you've made all the changes that you want to make, you've decided who's going to be able to see your election results, all that kind of stuff. From there, you'd go up to the top of the form and you'd be able to save it. After that point, the form would end up potentially showing up in your organization page, allow you to collect those responses, and then ultimately see the results after everything is said and done. As far as content that I wanted to cover, that really does cover it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I will also provide another resource for you, a couple resources, as you're potentially building out your election, just in case you have questions along the way. I'm not seeing any other questions that are popping into the chat for right now, so let's go into those resources right away. So the first piece is that we do have a chat support team that you can always reach out to. So say, for instance, you're creating the form, you're like, I don't know how to do this thing that I want to do. The chat support is going to be a great option for you. You can go on in here and you can send a message to one of the folks on our team, and they'll be able to come back with a response to you and be able to answer that in a pretty quick manner. The other thing that's also available to you is that maybe you're working on the settings on this form and you're getting a little bit confused there. You can also search for settings or whatever your topic is, and it's going to show you support articles that we've written that will also help to answer some of those questions. So if I click on form settings, this is going to bring me on over to an article that talks about all of the different settings that some of them I talked about a little bit in depth, but other ones I skimmed right past. So you can go in and learn about what each of those different areas does. The other piece in here is that there also is an article as well that's all about creating elections for through Presence. You can also go in here and end up seeing an article that we have available with some best practices that we've learned along the way. So with that, that's all the information that I wanted to cover for today. Are there any questions that folks have, or Allison, to Neil, any things that you'd like me to clarify or go into a little bit more?
Don't see any additional questions in the chat. And I think that you've pretty much covered a great deal of it. Are there any questions from any of our attendees on today?
All right. I think that kind of covers it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciated having this opportunity.
Thank you so much for coming on today, Travis. Are there any questions from anyone who's left? Nope. Okay, I will share with you all. Thank you, Travis, so much for taking us through the elections process. And remember, this session has been recorded, so if there was something that you missed, you can go back and you can watch the recording a little bit later. I will share with you all some of our upcoming sessions as well that we will be hosting starting next Monday, for every Monday that's left in this month. So give me 1 second to pull those up. All right, so this whole month of April, we'll be hosting Organization Transition Month, and we have a few more upcoming sessions. So next up, we have Organization Transition. We will be talking about leaving a lasting legacy, and so that will be on Monday, April 12th from 4 to 5 p.m. right back here on Teams. And so for that session, you'll join us for tips and recommendations on how to best transition officers of your organization and how to leave a legacy as an outgoing officer. And again, these sessions are open to all members of your student organization, so you can invite everyone to attend, especially those new incoming officers and those outgoing officers as well. And then on the following Monday, April 19th from 4 to 5 p.m. again here on Teams, we will be partnering with the UT Dallas Multicultural Center and Intercultural Programs to have a discussion about the value of diversity, cultural competency, and inclusion within your student organizations. So again, we want you to join us from 4 to 5 on Teams. And then rounding out the last Monday of the month, we'll be having a Student Organization Center orientation for all. And this is just a great opportunity for you to gain valuable information regarding all of the SOC processes, resources, deadlines, mandatory requirements for all of our registered student organizations. And it's not listed here in this presentation, but we will be doing a few raffles for some organization items at the remainder of our sessions. And so we're looking at raffling branded tablecloth up to $125 for organization event t-shirts. We're looking at a set of easels, Bluetooth speakers, and then also a really cool pop-up banner that will be branded with organization information that you can utilize once we return to our regular in-person programs. And so you don't want to miss the opportunity for your organization to potentially win any of those items. So definitely you want to share this with other organization members and then your friends who are in other organizations as well. Are there any additional questions before we leave out? Anything you've thought of potentially for Travis, who's here with us from Presence, or anything for Allison and myself? All right, I'm not seeing any in the chat, so if nothing else, we thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you for some of our future sessions, and we give a virtual round of applause for Travis. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.